A little more on passing since I just glossed over it in the last video. First, I really don't like the word passing because to me it implies some sort of deception about who you are. And that leads me to my second point. Why wouldn't you just be yourself? If you Google this topic, you'll find all sorts of, quote, passing tips, from how you should cut your hair, to how you should speak monotone and avoid raising your voice at the end of sentences, to how you should always make sure to give firm handshakes, and I mean, if you want to fit into some scientist definition of what a male generally acts like and looks like, yeah, okay, those are great starting points. But honestly, I think the goal with being trans and struggling with that is allowing you to be yourself and to have other people see you as the person you truly are. So if you want to do that, you can either study a manual of little cues on how to modify your behavior so you can fit into some generic idea of what males look and act like, and I won't criticize you if you do that, but you could also just be yourself and be confident in yourself, and I think that the latter goes a long way. Obviously, I'm not claiming that just because you're confident that you'll, quote, pass 100% of the time, but I do really think it makes a difference. There's something about someone who exudes insecurity that leads other people to pick up on those insecurities. So, I don't know. As I said, I'm not saying that being confident will magically make everyone see you the way you want to be seen, but hey, in the very least, you'll be yourself and you'll be confident about it. I don't really see myself as having a trans identity, actually. That may sound weird coming from someone who's on here blogging and making videos about it and things, but I prefer to think of myself as someone of trans experience rather than as someone who's trans. And I know that that distinction isn't really clear to everyone. Some people may think it's nonsense or a form of denial, and I do get where they're coming from. But all I'm saying is that I simply see myself as a guy who happens to have been born in the wrong body. And that fact is about as important to me as the fact that I was born with a heart problem. Yeah, having a heart problem has affected me, mostly when I was younger and before I had surgeries, but even today, it still affects me. But it doesn't play a major role in who I am, and it doesn't define me. However, something I have been able to embrace in the past year or so is finally feeling a sort of brotherhood, I guess you could say, with other trans guys. That was something I never really felt before, and I guess you could say I've embraced my ability to connect with them and to just be one of the guys with other trans guys. Wait, people actually have rock anthems? I don't, so I'm just gonna say the first band that comes to mind, Placebo, something by them. I never really bound myself in traditional ways. At the end of middle school and beginning of high school, I was using a back brace, one of those things that's meant to be worn like around the lower back, but I was wearing it up top instead, obviously. But I couldn't really breathe in those, and I was fairly small-chested anyway, so after a while I just started wearing like 1 or 2 sports bras at the same time, and sometimes I'd even pull on a really tight undershirt over that. And because I was pretty small, that basically did the trick. But if I was ever feeling like really insecure or showing a little more than I'd like, I would usually just take like a zip-up sweatshirt or something and leave it unzipped so it was kind of like hanging open at the sides, and I found that that disguised me well enough. So, yeah. I guess I'll talk about laws regarding legal gender change, since that's what I have most experience with and knowledge about. Now that I've actually gotten most of my documentation changed, it's kind of easy for me to say that the laws served me quite well in the end, but the truth is that the process took way longer than it should have, and I was also very, very lucky in the sense that everything I needed to do in order to change my documentation were things that I wanted to do and could afford to do. However, the sad thing is that there are many people out there who should be sufficiently far in their transition, or people who have even completed what they consider a full transition, who are still unable to change their documentation, and I don't really think that's fair. I feel like the laws in many countries and states are made with some general idea in mind about what constitutes a full transition, and with what the start and end point of a transition, quote, should be. However, the truth is that a transition is a very individual thing, and it's really an individual who should have the freedom to decide what a full transition is for him or herself. And I'm not saying there shouldn't be any guidelines at all. I just like to see them take the form of, say, the new US passport laws, which don't have any specific surgical or medical requirements in order to change the gender marker. They just leave it up to the individual's doctor to determine if a transition is complete. And I understand that convincing a doctor can be problematic in itself, but I think it's much fairer than Sweden, for example, which requires trans people to be sterilized to change their legal documents, or states in the US which also require various surgical procedures or hormone treatments in order to change certain documentation. I'm not religious, and even though religion did play some role in my life growing up, even my family has kind of distanced itself from the church now, so I just really don't have much to say here. I will say that I think it's kind of absurd to feel shame about who you are for religious reasons. I personally don't believe in God, but if this supposedly all-loving God did exist, I have a really hard time believing that he'd want that. The more time I spend with people who have their own small children, the less I can explain why this is the case, but I do want to be a parent someday way down the line. The vain part of me also wants a kid who is biologically related to me because, let's face it, such a kid would be incredibly awesome. But if you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I got a histo about a year ago or so, and so that's no longer possible. In a way, that was a hard decision for me, but I realized that I couldn't really have gone through with all the necessary steps to have my own kid anyway, so it worked out fine. It ended up being the right thing for me. And honestly, having a kid who's not biologically related to me won't make that child any less my own, so I am looking forward to being a parent someday. I personally have no problem blending into the cisgendered community. I don't really feel like I lose an important part of my identity in doing so. I mean, to be honest, I don't actually live my life thinking about communities and feeling part of one and not part of another. On a day-to-day basis, I just live my life as a person who interacts with other people, and I don't even really have a sense of who's in what community, nor do I really care. Because to be honest, there are people I have common ground with in both communities, and there are people who tick me off in both communities. And there are viewpoints I agree with and viewpoints that I find outrageous in both communities. So, I don't know. As I said, I just live my life as an individual who interacts with other individuals. I don't have much of a community sense one way or the other.